Okay, let's the next question from Mark. What are your thoughts on the Targummim? From what I've heard, they are Hebrew to Aramaic to English translations during and before the times of Yeshua. That's pretty good, Mark. That's absolutely right. The Targummim, the word actually means translation. Targum in Hebrew means to translate. So a Targum is something that is translated. But keep in mind that these translations are more than just translations. What they really become are commentaries, because they're really more of an interpretation, right? And for some people that may not know this, there's a technical difference between a translation and an interpretation. So let's say, I don't know, New King James or King James. Okay, that's a translation. The guys that were taking it from Hebrew to English or Greek to English were doing their very best to keep it as accurate, as literal, as close as they could to the original text, but just putting it into English words and phrases. Take something like the Peterson Message Bible. That's very much an interpretation, right? Because he's not really trying to stay close to the text. He's just trying to give you the basic gist. And sometimes he even adds his own little twists on it, right? So that's very much an interpretation. So the Targummim, while they do take it from Hebrew to Aramaic, that's true. So they're a translation in that sense, but they're an interpretation because they add a lot of things that are not specifically in the text, not in the Hebrew text anyway. So what we can then infer from that is that when these things were translated, what we see in the Targum, in the translation, that a lot of those ideas that we don't find in the biblical text, in the Hebrew text, that these are ideas, these are teachings, forms of commentary that made their way into the Targum. You might think of it like what a pastor does, okay? A pastor will open up the word, he'll read it, he'll give an interpretation of that. And so that is kind of what the Targummim are. Now, there are different Targummim. You have Targum Yonatan or Jonathan. You have Targum Naphtali, and there's some others. And so the Targum Jonathan is much more interpretive, okay? It really goes into areas where you're like, where do they get that, okay? The Targum Naphtali, it stays much closer to the Hebrew and has less interpretation. So those are some aspects to understand about the Targummim. And it is very significant that these were both before and after the time of Jesus. But here's the important thing to understand, is that they were written outside the land of Israel. In the land of Israel, right, so Judea, the Galilee, etc., they were speaking Hebrew, right? And I document all of that in my book, The Language of Jesus, Discovering the Language of Jesus, all right? And in the land of Israel, they were speaking Hebrew. Outside of the land of Israel, where Hebrew was being forgotten, and the court language of Babylon, which was very prevalent, Aramaic, that is what they were speaking. And so they would have used that language outside the land of Israel. But in the land of Israel, they were speaking Hebrew. Very important distinction.